Hello everyone and welcome back to another Strategoy video. It's Soulblight Day today. Ryan, we're reviewing the vampires. How are you feeling?
Man, we've now seen all of the Death Armies. This is the first time we've seen a whole Grand Alliance completed, I think, thus far, because we still have some Chaos, Destruction, and Order armies. And I have to say, the Death Armies, too long didn't read. The Death Armies came out real well in this index, I think. But we'll talk about it in detail shortly.
Yeah, we're in a bit of a time crunch because I have a lot of work to do, and you're actually starting another job in a couple of minutes. Let's get to it, shall we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So battle trades time. We quickly discussed a little bit of this before we started recording, Ryan, but not much has actually changed. Most of the things that we remember from the vampires or from Soulblight is still there. The Six of Art is gone, but that has obviously moved to the War Scrolls, and the grave sites are gone, but are still in spirit in the game because their rules are still a little bit recognizable in these abilities.
Yeah. The only,
Yeah, let's
sorry.
look
Yeah.
at. Do you want to mention something here?
Sure. I just want to say the only thing that's on here that didn't used to be on here is the hunger, which
Yeah,
was on War Scrolls. So
yeah,
why don't we get that out of the way, and then we can talk about how all the other stuff functions.
exactly. Yeah, okay. So the hunger is now a once per turn ability. I kind of like it. It's way more neat than it was before. So at the end of any turn, you just pick each friendly vampire unit that uses the fight ability this turn. You heal them D3, and if they destroyed a unit, you heal them 2D3. So this is actually a quite an important buff here because they don't actually have to kill something; they just have to use a fight ability, which is a nice quality of life change.
Yeah, and getting all of them is totally fine, and it's every turn.
Yeah,
All right, so I guess they still have. That was always the case, right? It was every combat phase that
yeah,
they. Yeah, so yeah, and now it's no longer dependent on the order in which you fight, right? Because sometimes before you wanted to have
yeah,
fought first, or you wanted them to have fought first, so that you had some wounds to heal, maybe. Um, but yeah, so this is good.
yeah. And healing 2D3 is new. Um, it, we'll have to see how often this happens. I think it'll happen quite often for the vampire lords on zombie dragons. Healing
Yeah.
2d3 compared to just d3 is a huge buff.
Yeah, and it was D6 up to your
Yeah,
like yeah, and 2D3 is statistically better than a D6 on
yeah,
average. So, yeah.
yeah. Okay, so that's the hunger. I think it's still a fine ability. It's very flavorful. It doesn't really impact my games a whole lot usually, but I can see doing more work now. Actually, now that I don't actually have to kill a model, because if you're fighting multi-wound models, especially with your tiny vampire lords, they usually didn't kill them. so
Sure.
so now they at least get some healing in for just fighting.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we're moving to the Unquiet Dead and the Rising Dead. I'll use those two together when we're reviewing them because they're the typical deploy and setup ability combo that you need. So there's obviously no grave sites anymore, but you can still set up stuff in the grave. So as long as you don't have more units in the grave than on the battlefield, you can just put some of your Deathrattle and Deathwalker just Deathwalkers in there. So I don't actually have to say Deathwalkers, it's Deadwalkers and Deathrattle. how,
Yeah.
how fun for my pronunciation issues.
At least you
And
didn't
one,
have the sick blade. What was it? The sick blades, slick blade.
yeah,
I still can't do
yeah,
it. At least you
yeah.
don't have that to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a very recognizable thing. You do it in a deployment phase as you would have done so before. And then in your movement phase, you get to set up a unit wholly within 6 inches of a terrain features. That's new. And more than 9 inches from all enemy units. So before you had to set them up within a certain range of a grave site. This fluctuated over time. I think the latest iteration was wholly within 12 inches of a grave site, which was quite generous. 6 inches
Yeah.
with wholly within 6 inches of a terrain feature is quite um, harsh in some ways, but then again, there's probably more terrain features than there were grave sites, so you'll have more places that you can set your stuff up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the standard battle, you've got 8 the terrain pieces, and as far as I'm aware, this terrain feature includes faction terrain.
Yeah.
So if someone's putting that down, you've got yet another option. So you can't choose where it is. You had a lot of choice before, right? 2 had to be in your deployment, and 2 had to
Mm-hmm.
be out. So I think
Well,
the
two,
holy
two,
that
two in your deployment and 2 anywhere on the battlefield.
okay, sure.
Yeah.
So I think it's at worst a side grade and largely still an upgrade, especially considering you don't have to keep track of those tokens.
Yeah.
And terrain features can be quite large, which means you might holier than 6 of a very large object means you might have a lot of reach, let's say,
Yeah.
where you could be.
Yeah.
It's going to really depend on where those terrain features are relative to the objective markers, considering the objectives are smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could see a version of, well, let's see. If we think about it, an objective marker is, let's see, is 40 millimeter plus 3 inch.
Yeah.
And usually it says you have to be outside, like a terrain feature has to be set up wholly outside of 3 inches of a terrain, so, or of objective marker. So it's implicitly possible to set it up on the
Yeah.
edge of that little marker now.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then 6 inches holier than that. So you could land on objectives,
Mm-hmm.
which is where my mind goes with this summoning, putting a
Yeah.
unit just directly onto an objective to steal it.
Yeah, the only thing that's probably a downside, but that obviously depends on battle tactics and how the game will play for scoring, is I usually wanted to place one of the grave sites in a corner somewhere, so I would at least always have a way to get units on a battlefield edge or behind enemy lines quite easily. Now with the... Oops. Did the mic pick that up?
Yeah, you're good. I think
Okay.
you're fine.
Now with how... how you have to set up wholly within 6 inches of terrain feature. Obviously, you have more choices, but the place that you can appear from are probably not as not as good as you would have liked if you had to if you could place your objectives or your grave sites yourself. So that's the only downside. But as you say, it's a side grade and sometimes even an upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to Deathly Invocation. So that's a once per turn ability now in any hero phase, which is nice though. So you pick a friendly Soulblight Gravelords hero to use this ability, then up to 3 friendly Deathrattle or Deadwalkers units wholly within 12 inches of that hero to be the target. I think that's a shorter range than it was before.
No, it was the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
For each target, if the target is damaged, you heal 3. Which is nice. And if the target is not damaged, you return a number of slain models to it with a combined health characteristic of up to 3. I have seen so many iterations of this rule by now, Ryan, that I always have to check again in my book what it is right now. But I feel like when I'm reading this, it's almost exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, if they were standing near a grave site, you would add 1 to the number of slain models that are returned. And it used to be that every single hero could trigger this.
Yes.
So now only 1. So that's the biggest nerf on this. But that said, most of the recursion this army's got is still there in a way that I think is going to feel totally fine at the end of the day. So like this is a soft nerf, but it's relatively soft compared to what we've seen. So
yeah, and it leaves some options open as well, since it's any hero phase now.
yes, you're getting, obviously if you had 1 hero before, this is twice as good as that, because that 1 hero is going to be bringing back every turn instead of just once per battle round. If you have 2 heroes, then I guess it comes out to the same. And then if you had 3 or more heroes before, technically it's a nerf. But
Okay.
Yeah.
So Deathly Invocation, I think it's easier to manage this way as well. It'll be interesting how it pans out, I guess.
Yeah.
Onto Endless Legions. It's a command ability once per turn for your army in any movement phase, so it might as well be your opponent's. You pick a friendly, non-unique Deathrattle or Deadwalkers units that start the battle with 2 or more models and it has been destroyed to be the target. So far, almost the same as it used to work before. Set up a replacement unit with half the number of models from the target unit running up wholly within 12 inches of a friendly Soulblight Gravelords hero, or wholly within 6 inches of its terrain feature. So this is also nice. It's kind of replacing the gravesite here. It must be set up more than 9 inches from all enemy units, which is the same since they nerfed the previous iteration of this. And then if it is your movement phase though, you can set up the replacement unit more than 3 inches from all enemy units instead of more than 9. But if you set it up within 9 inches of an enemy unit, you cannot use charge abilities, which is a bummer but makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's now gained the ability to charge if it is set up outside of 9, whereas before it wasn't allowed to. Let me see if I have that right. Yeah, and it cannot attempt to charge or make pile-in moves the same turn that it came in. That was just the text. So, this is a kind of an upgrade. It gives you some flexibility there. Plus, again, the same side grade with the grave sites being turned into just terrain features means there's more out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the only thing I'm wondering about, Ryan, is that they mentioned specifically in an article, I think the Zinch article, that you could not move after setting up, but they didn't mention anything about charging, right? Or did they?
No, it was the KO article, and it just said you could charge, but you just couldn't move in the movement phase.
Okay, then we're good. Yeah.
So yeah. Obviously, the range around the gravesite has been cut down to match what we see with the Rising Dead, like deployment of 6 instead of 12, but it's still holier than 12 of a hero, so that's good.
Yeah.
And you're no longer rolling. It used to be on a 4-up or a
Yes.
3-up, and now it's a guaranteed, but you have to pay a CP. And I don't know about you, but I think that might be stronger.
For sure. I would take that trade any day.
I mean, I know CP are going to be a little precious now, but at the same time, it's just for a fact it's coming onto the table. So
yeah, and before, sure, with the rolling, it was nice for the cheaper units. Like I have to admit that if you're playing, like, let's say 10 skeletons and you get to return 5 for free, you're like, I'm fine if it does, and I'm fine if it doesn't. I don't know whether I would spend a CP on returning 5 skeletons.
That's fair.
So you'll have to take your resources into consideration more than you would before now, but at least you gain the, as you say, the certainty that it'll happen on the stronger units that you want it to be used on.
Yeah. There's a slight change that might be in play here with all of these rules that refer to Deathrattle or Deadwalkers, because as far as I'm aware, when it used to refer to summonable, and that used to also lump in Fellbats. And they typically haven't had either of those keywords. So it might be that Fellbats are gone from this ability, or it might be that they just gained one of the two. But I think the rest of the units that were formerly summonable are either Deathrattle or Deadwalkers. I could be wrong. Let us know in the comments below.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Battle formations?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure. So the Death March, man. Thing is, if you've played vampire accounts like me for most of your Warhammer days, I've been playing iterations of vampires and Deathrattle stuff for over 15 years now. If anyone asked me what does Death March do, I would say it was a battle formation in one of our earliest books from 2nd edition, but now I don't actually know whether it's something recognizable from 3rd edition anymore. I just know that the ability here is not like any sub-faction that we have right now. So this is something completely new. Though the name Tide of Bones and Blades, I think might have been on the White King's War Scroll. But it's definitely something new with the rend characteristic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so it would actually just add 1 rend to all melee weapons, which doesn't really matter because we don't have ranged weapons, by friendly Deathrattle units that charge this in the same turn, but you also have to attack a unit with fewer models than the attacking unit themselves. So this is kind of... I like the first part, and I really don't like the last part. It feels a little bit too harsh here. What do you think?
Well, I mean, it's gonna definitely be buffing your Graveguard. The Graveguard are gonna love this, depending on what their War Scroll looks like. But obviously, they're one of your better hammers in the army.
Yeah.
And then skeletons, sure. I mean, it gives them the rend back that they used. They basically had this rule before that they got +1 rend against a unit they were bigger than, but the charge wasn't a part of it, if I'm not mistaken. So this is kind of giving that back. But the Graveguard are gonna like it. Obviously, none of the heroes, the whites, like the White Kings or whatever, can't use it because they're never going to outnumber anything.
Yeah, and your horses might not either. Actually, the Black Knights.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's the other unit.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, adding +1 rend in a place where we're turning rend off, in addition where we're kind of like removing excess rend from the game is certainly a good ability. The thing is, all those units are relatively slow except for the Black Knights, what you just said. So,
yeah, I would be fine with either half of this ability. You know what I mean? I would be fine adding 1 to rend if you charge, or adding 1 to rend if you were attacking a unit smaller than your own. But I don't necessarily see why this is so strong that you need both of these things.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be plenty of units that, because we can't triple the size of a unit anymore. We can't double reinforce anything. So the unit sizes are going to be a little smaller, I think. Obviously, going into hordes, this isn't going to do much. But then again, you probably don't need the rend, right? Yeah. So I think they kind of balance each other out. I think harsher is that you have to have charged. And like I was just saying, some of these slower units have a hard time guaranteeing that.
Yeah.
So, but, I'm not against it. If we scroll down and look at the other formations that are going to be around, this leads to kind of my biggest thing I see as a nerf. So they mentioned one's like pro wizards, another one is pro vampires, and another one is zombie hordes. Interesting that they chose to go for zombie hordes again, which is good for the people that bought a shit ton of them. So that's a happy day for people that like that playstyle. But I was kind of hoping that kind of thing would die out. But the implicit thing that isn't being said here is that Soulblight is like the last army that really felt like it had different armies inside the book. And I'm not counting like Auric War Clans because that was always kind of a separate thing. I mean, like their sub-factions felt like totally different armies. And even in the current 3.0 book, they had their own battle traits, sometimes heroic actions and monstrous rampages, their unique command traits and unique artifacts, which kind of felt like what cities used to feel like. And I would consider that the biggest nerf we're seeing today, but it's something we could have totally seen coming, right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
That it's just what 4th edition is. It's not that relative to the other armies they got screwed. It's just a bummer that that's what 4th edition is that it's taking away that kind of, I have a Virkos army, I have an Avangori army, Castellai, whatever. That's just probably gone now. How do you feel about that as a Soulblight player?
Yeah, I thought I wouldn't really care that much because for my Lumineth, I don't really see it as a problem at all. But you're right. Now that I'm looking at the rules, I'm like, oh wait, I probably won't get that ability anymore, or I won't be getting that ability anymore. That being said, they have been becoming less cool for a while now. I think I liked the last book of the 2nd edition quite a lot because it was surprising back then that they kept their own artifacts and stuff like that. And that made them stand out, as you mentioned. But how the book is right now, a lot of those sub-faction rules didn't really feel as impactful anymore as they at least not as impactful as they should have been, or could have been, I should say. That being said, I'll miss people who just really love playing Castellai and can mention it in one word. And like, I'm playing Castellai, you're gonna be faced with a lot of Blood Knights and your Vampire Dragons. I find it weird that they didn't really open anything up here for the Castellai players, because that's such a popular archetype, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing we're not saying is that they could have moved a lot of the things that were battle traits for those armies onto their War Masters.
Yeah.
So, like, Manfred might have that teleport rule that he can give, like, another unit can use it instead of him. Yeah. So, those things might
make Blood Knights do something special.
Exactly. So let's not jump to conclusions.
Yeah, that's true. Fair point.
But we do get to see Lauka Vai, and she doesn't do what she used to do, really. So, but we'll get to it.
Yeah. Let's look at the Vile Transference rule, another classic one. 7 to cast. Basically nothing has changed here. The healing is a little bit stronger. Well, depends on what you roll, I guess. So you pick a friendly Soulblight Gravelords Wizards to cast a spell, obviously. Pick a visible enemy within 18 inches of them that has not been picked to be the target of this ability this turn to be the target. Then make a casting roll of 2d6. Roll a number of dice equal to the number of models in the target unit. For each 6, inflict 1 mortal damage on that unit. If any enemy models were slain by this spell, heal d3 to the caster. Some, subtle changes here. First
Yeah.
of all, it is now just any Soulblight Gravelords wizard, so it could be used by necromancers,
Yeah.
which it previously couldn't. It's obviously unlimited. Um, I think you used to roll a dice for each wound.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so that's interesting. So now it's more of a horde killer than a specific model killer.
Yes.
And it just heals D3 and not a wound for every damage that you inflicted.
And you have to have killed something, so it
Yeah.
really wants to go into health characteristic 1 units.
Yes. That's interesting.
But it's unlimited. And keep in mind the hunger. If someone sees it as like the hunger getting nerfed for some reason, now all of your wizards know this as well. Many of which had the hunger, so now they've got
Yeah.
a second source
Yeah.
of healing if they absolutely need it. The range is also double what it once was. So,
Actually,
but
yeah, go
what's
ahead.
that? Yeah, and the it used to have the bonus version where it would trigger on 4s instead of 5s
Mm-hmm.
for the mortal wounds. So it's less reliable that you're actually going to get anything going off. But if the unit's big enough, then it works out that you probably will. If the unit's 20 models, you're pretty certain you're going to get at least 1 killed. If it's 10 models, then it's only an average of 1 2/3 wounds. So you might not get the healing off. So I don't know. Yeah.
7 seems like a steep casting value for this spell.
I agree. Yeah, I think this spell's a little weak for an unlimited spell,
Mm-hmm.
but
If it could target the same unit, it would be totally cool.
yeah.
Just got a bunch of vampires and necromancers sitting around a horde, like that'd be cool. But because I don't see it being super impactful, as you mentioned, like best case scenario, you're probably using it on 20 models, and then how many wounds are you inflicting? 3.5.
Yeah. Yeah, 3 1/3, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'll kill something, but yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you no longer take this on your vampire lords and zombie dragons necessarily. Well, you don't take it on anything. You just get it, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope the other.
Let's-
I really wonder what they're gonna do with the other spells because they used to have two very separate lores.
Yeah.
They don't really mention anything about them here. If it's only 3 spells for all of our wizards and one of them is this one, that's a real bummer.
Yeah.
Okay. On to Radukar. I did not expect them to pick this unit.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't have strong. I think Lauka Vai got hit the hardest I saw.
Yeah.
But I mean, kind of. I don't. Yeah, we'll get to it. This one, he's now a monster,
Mm-hmm.
so he has a
And
control
a
score of
wizard.
5, and a wizard. Yeah, so which is a little bit more in flavor with the story behind
Yeah.
him, anyway. Because
I
for those
agree.
that don't know, it's Radukar the Wolf from Cursed City. He like transforms into this, I guess, when he gets either mad or gets dark or whatever. But in any case, this is his other form. I am curious if they're going to let you take both in the army. I'm assuming not,
Yeah,
because
probably
that's
not.
always been the case. But I don't know how the pitch battles look, the pitch battle profiles. His melee situation actually got a 50% performance improvement because he's got 3 damage instead of 2.
Yeah.
On his main profile, and his companions are these 2 Vargheists Bloodborne that run around with him, and I'm assuming that's what their profile is going to be. That's not really changed at all. So he used to, this passive ability he's got, if he charged, he's adding +1 to wound rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Deathrattle Deadwalkers and Vargheists
Yeah, that's
Bloodborne
new.
units. It's cool. I like it. Let's assume they're on that same profile, like 3 attacks, 3s, 3s, -1, 2, then 3s, 2s. That's pretty cool for a decent attack profile. The problem is no one can buy Vargheists Bloodborne separately. No one's going to be running a whole lot of them, I don't think.
I
Unless
think
people
this is
just
more of a flavor addition.
Sure, fair enough. It would be cool if it affected his own Vargheists Bloodborne too, since the other he doesn't count as Deathrattle or Deadwalker. But
Yeah.
I guess not.
His previous
And then
version of this was way stronger, though.
yes, it was +1 attack, right?
Yeah.
Then we've got his move thing he's got, which is once per turn army, but I'm assuming he's the only one that can use it. End of any turn. And if this unit is not in combat, it can move D6 and it can move into combat. I believe that's our first time seeing a Khorne-esque move into combat rule that we've seen.
Yeah.
It used to be that if he had taken damage at the end of any phase, he got to move but a D6, but he had to be outside of 12 of everyone, which is hard for an unit that wants to be in the middle of the fray. And
He could run and charge as well, right?
he lost that,
Yeah.
but he couldn't move into combat with the rule.
No.
And obviously this rule, if you do move into combat with it, is going to make it so you're not counting as charging for, because this is at the end of the turn. For the next turn, it certainly wouldn't count, and it wouldn't have anyway. So you're trading that off. So if you're trying to use him as a buff piece for your Deathrattle Deadwalkers units, then that won't be impacting it on that turn. But throwing this guy with his good profile into combat for free like that can really screw up your enemy's plans a bit. And of course, if they retreat, then they're taking D3 mortal wounds. So then you get something, even if they need to retreat out of it. How do you feel about this versus his other thing? It may be taking into consideration that he lost run and charge as well.
Yeah, to be honest, it's cool that he can move into combat and it's not a run thing anymore. But it's at the end of any turn. So you're always going to have to plan ahead with this. And if you manage to get him into combat at the end of your turn, your opponent will probably be able to strike him first now, without having the need to charge him. So it's a little bit a little bit risky, I guess. It really depends on how you want to use him and how expensive he's gonna be, because his melee profile is actually quite sick, or should I say blood slick.
Yeah.
But I still feel like he dies to a stiff breeze. I know it's not the case because he has a 4+ save, which is fine in this edition, and a 6+ war, but he used to be a little harder to kill because he got the -1 to hit automatically without the spell casting stuff.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like I'm thinking about using him tactically, like dominoing, or if you want to domino chaining his way around. And then maybe trying to pull in units that have charge bonuses. And if you can turn that off, then you're really wiping out not only their movement shenanigans, but also their ability to maximize their output. So I think it depends on the situation. But obviously, you can also just forget about that rule and use him to boost your Graveguard and like wolves and stuff.
Yeah.
We haven't seen their profiles, but I'm assuming Graveguard is still the best hammer you've got. So, we'll have to see.
Yeah, we're gonna get new Graveguard anyway, so
yeah, that's the rumor.
Yeah. So yeah, the last thing we have to mention here is the Armor of the Knights. This is obviously new because it didn't used to be a caster before. So on a 6+, you subtract 1 from hit and wound rolls that target for attacks that target this unit for the rest of the turn. So that's a bit of an interesting addition there. That means that you actually have to use the spellcasting intervention if you want to make him -1 to hit and wound in your opponent's turn.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like that.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably not this. The question is, how good are the rest of the spells?
Yeah.
If you're not like dying to put something out in your opponent's turn, then might as well. Depends on what else.
It's not that I mind having to cast this, right? It's just that it can be unbound. And you need to sync in a command point to have it in your opponent's turn.
But, I mean, also, if you're playing him, I think, correctly, he's probably got a lot of other units around him. Mm-hmm. So he might be able to screen out some stuff by having some, skeletons and Graveguard and whatever in the neighborhood. So, I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see how he interplays with the rest of the army.
Yeah.
But for
the
moment,
has been nerfed, I suppose. So I have to keep that in mind when I'm judging a unit.
Yeah, I still think that movement into combat is very good.
Super cool. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
Also, he has a 5 control score now, which is a slight improvement of his 2 before.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Lauka Vai.
Lauka Vai.
So I'll just cover the obvious things here. She point of save and 2 inches of move. Mm-hmm. The -1 to rend ability that we're seeing in the upper left-hand corner is still the same. Mm-hmm. The combat phase rampage that she's got is this is a weird one. We haven't seen this wording before, but you roll a dice if she charged, and then you compare it to the target's health characteristic. And you inflict and if it's equal to or less than, you inflict amount of mortal damage equal to that roll. So if they've got a health characteristic of 6 or higher, it's by default doing D6 mortal damage. And then of course it's on because any roll you make is successful. So it's just roll a D6. And then it gets increasingly worse as your unit gets smaller. So this is kind of like she's a monster hunter or big target hunter, I guess, is the point of this thing. this used to be, I guess, kind of her impaling tail profile, which she lost, but that was doing less than 1 wound
Yeah.
on average. So I think this is definitely better.
Mm-hmm.
And then the spell that she's got here used to be, she had a couple of Avangori abilities. The spell was one that let Avangori monsters like nearby or in 24 inches be able to have the 6-inch pile-in eligibility and fight eligibility. And that's just not what she's doing. She's adding D3 to the one specific companion profile for any Soulblight monster holier than 12-inch. Just one, you pick one. So the real question is, we haven't seen what the companion profiles will really look like on those monsters. I mean, you
Well,
could look at him, Radukar, and the Bloodborne, but adding D3 attacks to their profile is fine. But I think this is probably more focusing on the Terrorgeist, right?
yeah, or the zombie dragon, but we could have compared the zombie dragon that we've seen from Flesh Eater Courts.
Sure. I'd have to pull that up. We don't have any guarantee that it's going to be the same, but there's a good chance it would. So really, what you're looking for is you want to put, when you're adding attacks to something, is you want to put on something that has a high damage characteristic but low attacks, generally speaking,
Yeah.
because it's only D3. Whereas if it was adding to damage, it would be the other way around. You'd want to boost the attacks. That ends up increasing the likelihood you get a crazy amount through.
Yeah.
And then she also had an ability that the functional version of what this did was it allowed an Avangori monster to carry out 2 monstrous rampages in one turn instead of one. But obviously that system has been overhauled. So yeah, and she also lost War Master, which is weird. I don't know
Very
what that's
weird.
going to
So
imply
weird.
for the
Yeah.
other characters. Who do you expect to be a War Master still?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Radukar doesn't have it, does he? No, that makes sense because it was gonna be Babushka anyway. But yeah, man, that's weird. I hadn't even picked up on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably Neferata and probably Vordry and Manfred are going to have it
Well,
still.
Vordry is another question then. If Lauka Vai didn't get it, maybe Vordry doesn't either because he's also not a Mortarch. But
Okay.
Neferata and Manfred are definitely gonna have it.
Okay. Well, so there's at least 2.
Yeah, I like that there's a resemblance here though in the quality of the scroll with Radukar. So I guess they're gonna be the same price tag. Like they want every faction to have this sort of good monster on their own as well. They don't necessarily need to be buffing stuff to get their value. I just find it weird that she doesn't have any abilities on her weapons or something like that. I miss a little bit of flavor on this war scroll.
Yeah, it just feels kind of bland.
Yeah.
The thing I'm saying here, though, about whether it's actually a nerf is that I don't think a lot of people were using her all that much in their games because she was very Avangori centric. And if you were going to use this model or this kit, you're probably more likely to just bring the normal Vingorian Lord. So I don't know if this is like really going to make a dent on the usage of Lauka Vai one way or the other.
Yeah,
But
I
it
mean, I
depends.
can see myself bringing her if I'm running a zombie dragon as well.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, remember those companion attacks in this edition are mostly hitting on 4s.
Yeah,
So, that's something to keep in mind. Okay, in the interest of time, I need to move on. Blood Knights.
Onto the Blood Knights, yeah.
So, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the Blood Knights, quite a good scroll still. They retained their 3+ save, which is amazing. And they gained 2 inches of movement.
Yeah,
which
amazing.
is very deserving because I always was bothered by the fact that it was only 10 inches. Their Templar weapons are mostly the same with the abilities next to them at least. Correct me if I'm wrong here.
Well, it's the same against infantry. Against non-infantry, it's 1 rend worse.
Yeah. The Nightmares obviously have gotten a little bit worse because they used hit on 4s, I think, or even 3s maybe for the Nightmares.
It was 4s and 4s. It got marginally worse. It's not really what the most of the damage was.
Okay, and then their abilities are the same in name, but they've changed a little bit. So the Rider of Ruin is now a passive ability, and I kind of like this one even more than their previous version. So when you move, these units can just flat out move through or over any enemy infantry, whatever move ability you use. But you can only end your move in combat if it's specifically noted for in that move ability. But that does mean that you could, for example, during your movement phase, run or normal move or charge through 3 inches of the 3-inch combat range of enemy units and then end up on a different unit if you wanted.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. And also a buff here that might not be obvious is say 3 or a wounds characteristic of 3 or less, which now means not only that it can do 4 or more, but it can also go through heroes, which it used to not be able to.
Yeah.
So they have a little more flexibility with getting around. I guess it's like they turn into bats or something. What are they? Are they just literally walking over everyone? Is that all it is?
Yeah, they're just so armored that they just crush something or push it aside when they're moving past them.
Okay, cool.
And a little bit in combination with that rule, you've got the trample to dust ability that's in any charge phase. So you pick an enemy unit that is unit passed across to be the target. Roll a d3 on a 2-up, inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. That's fine, but nothing to write home about.
Yeah, it used to be every unit that it passed across, it would do this. And although this isn't actually a change to how it used to work, what's interesting is it's a charge phase ability. You might think, they have to have landed a charge, but it just says pick an enemy unit that it moved across this turn. So even though it happens in the charge phase, you could have failed a charge. As long as you've moved over someone, you can still do it. So that's okay. Yeah. Overall, I feel like what you said about them having plus 2-inch move, basically the same melee profile and the same save, makes them actually, relative to everything else we've seen, have a slight buff.
Yeah.
All things considered, despite what happened in the Mortal Wounds thing.
Yeah.
So
they also just look really solid.
Yeah.
Moving on?
Yeah, let's do it.
So these are my babies, Ryan.
Oh yeah, really?
Yes. These were the models why I got into vampire counts back in the day. And every iteration in Age of Sigmar has seen them becoming worse and worse. I still think they're pretty bad, but it's cooler than the previous version. Do you want to take the lead on this?
Sure. I mean, I actually think this is secretly the best buffed unit we've seen today.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So the weapons wheel is the same. Their output is slightly, it's worse than it was before. But they're not necessarily the main tech of this unit. It's still decent output at 3s, 3 attacks, 4s, 3s, -1, 2.
Yeah.
And they always had crit exploding hits, so they lost a point to hit, and that's why their output went down. But their big thing now is instead of deep striking, they have, if it's not in combat, you can just, this is once per turn, mind you, so if you have 2 units, you're only...
Yeah, and only you're in your own movement phase.
Sure, but like that's what tree revs do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so the value tree revs bring to anything, if you get that in any army, is just, I don't care if they're in combat or not. In fact, I don't want them to be for this ability. The fact that you can teleport and go accomplish a thing strategically is so valuable. I think a minimum size unit of one of these, depending on points, is probably an auto take in an army.
Yeah.
Just in the same way I would with tree revs. And I don't think we could have ever said that about Vargheists until now.
That's fair. Yeah.
So I think this unit secretly just got juiced the fuck up. It's like, because that ability is so strong. I'd much rather have that ability than a deep strike.
Yeah, the thing is that I've always felt like they started giving them these abilities, and I always felt like they were emphasizing the bad side of them more than their actually killing side. And they used to be such good damage dealers, and they've not been that for a very long time. They're still not going to be that seeing from this profile at least.
Well, I mean, it's not a bad profile. I mean, again, this is like roughly a Stormcast profile. It's 2 2/3.
Yeah, but the fact that it's an okay profile, Ryan, is actually in my eyes a little bit worse, because compared to tree revs, they have a bad profile, so they're at least not paying for that profile. Now the Vargheists are gonna pay for a profile, but they die to literally anything, and you're gonna have to set them up on your turn, which is nice. Don't get me wrong; it's super good for scoring and all that stuff. But it's only, if it's a three model size units, it's only 3 control. Sure. So you're not even, competing with a 5 control Stormcast MSU unit. So yeah, it's cool. I really love those kind of abilities, as you know. And I agree that I can see them being taken at least for one unit in every army if they're not too overpriced. But I think if they're too expensive or a little bit on the expensive side, you will easily forget these guys on your shelf once again.
Yeah, sure, could be, but I mean, keep in mind when tree revs went up from 1 wound to 2, you could have made the same argument that now you're paying for a thing that you don't need because they're never going to be in combat.
Yeah, I did make the same
But
argument then.
and then and then the same point stands here that I don't care if their points go up. Like, I don't care if I'm not using them in combat. The fact that I have a teleport in an army that doesn't usually have a teleport, to me, is like almost priceless.
Yeah, fair
Almost.
enough.
Like, so it just really depends. And with a 12-inch move, they can still get around pretty easily, even if you don't use the teleport
Yeah,
ability.
that's true.
So anyway, all right, I got to move on, unfortunately, guys,
Yeah.
to the last point here, which is the skeletons.
Yeah, a little bit of a weird war
So
scroll.
it is a spearhead, so we don't know
Mm-hmm.
for sure. They got an extra attack, right? So that's good. They lost their automatic extra Rin, but like we talked about earlier, if they have that subfaction, they can get it back.
Mm-hmm.
They have -1 to their previous wound, but this is a like kind of hordy battle line unit. I wouldn't be too disappointed. They've got the human profile now.
Yeah.
They still come back. It's on a 5-up instead of a 4-up, so that's probably the big nerf on this war scroll. But I don't know that recursion really needs to be, what it once was. And to be fair, I think the army's still pretty good at recurring. So
Yeah, and you
what
don't
do you?
actually have to activate them now to have the recursion. It's just any combat phase, so you could do it whenever you wanted.
Yeah. Well, this no. I mean, I'm looking at the current rule right now. It says at the start of the combat phase.
Oh,
So it.
all right.
I,
Yeah, I'm thinking about how you actually wanted them to be damaged, and then you could activate them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Mm,
But yeah, so they fixed that in the last book anyway. But
yeah.
obviously, going from a 4 to a 5 is a nerf. But otherwise, like, as a decent battle line unit that's human level, why not? Sure. And they keep coming back. So,
Yeah.
what kind of rule do you expect to see on their war scroll if it's not identical to this in the normal game?
I expect the same thing. And
Okay.
if I would have to say something completely differently, it's probably something like if they outnumber the unit, you get +1 to your hit rolls or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, that could be it. Yeah. Ultimately, though, how are you feeling about Soulblight? You're the Soulblight player.
Yeah, I mean, I think as Soulblight players, we can be quite content right now. We've not really seen any major changes. The feel of the army is still very much the same. Obviously, we're gonna miss, as you mentioned, we're gonna miss the sub-factions a lot, I think, flavor-wise. It's just for an army that has so many war scrolls, it is just really hard to gauge how good everything's gonna be, because I've not seen the most crucial of stuff. I mean, I haven't even seen a Mortark yet, and those used to dictate how you play your game. So I'm waiting for that. I'm waiting for the Graveguard, especially because they use as to be our heavy hitters, as you mentioned. But I'm happy with the Blood Knights, and Radukar and Lauka Vai are fine. I hope they're reasonably priced, and then in that case, I'll definitely be running them.
What were your two main builds that you played when you played Soulblight?
I played a lot of Legion of Night because, as you know, I love the teleporting stuff and I love Manfred. So Legion of Night with just Chaff and then one or two big Graveguard units. And then I played a little bit of Legion of Blood as well with Neferata, Zombie Dragon, and just a bunch of vampires, because the vampires is why I was in the game. So I'm really curious for that battle formation that improves vampire abilities. I imagine it's just gonna be +1 casting and maybe +1 to hit or something, but we'll see.
Sure. Yeah. Or maybe they heal better. Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe close us out here and we'll call it a day.
So guys, thank you so much for watching. Sorry we have to rush through this one, but as a gift to you guys, we'll definitely have to be reviewing this index because it's one of my armies, and Ryan plays against them a bunch. And it's probably going to be our longest review ever, as it was in our previous review edition, because they have just such a huge amount of war scrolls. But yeah, let us know what you think about this. Fellow Soulblight players, are you happy? Leave a like and subscribe if you want to stay in touch for the Seraphon review next Monday. I'm super psyched about that as well. And you can obviously find me and Ryan and everyone else in the Discord. So I guess we'll see you there. On to the next one for this Monday, Ryan. See you then as well. Bye-bye.